Surprised you didn't comment right off the rip that I'm having a coffee at 6 o'clock at night. Actually, there's the second half of what I didn't finish this morning. I only had one cup and I forgot about it.
Yeah. All right. Anybody joining this live? Theme of the night's going to be closing your first wholesale account.
I had a question that I answered earlier today, actually, that I thought was pretty interesting, and it was something that I feel like I dealt with a lot. And it was, if you have an angry brand owner, how do you deal with that? And I kind of explained that, it's a little bit about determining why they're so angry, right? People usually aren't angry for no reason. But I mean, something like that, especially as a beginner, can kind of turn you off to wholesale. I think if you get yelled at and the phone gets hung up in your face, it could be kind of difficult to maybe come back to wholesale and be open minded to it.
Yep.
A lot of stuff at the beginning, it's a business model of instant gratification or lack thereof, and so like it's sometimes it's hard for the beginner going from retail arbitrage or online arbitrage into wholesale to kind of come to that understanding of like it's not always going to be fun. It's not going to have that treasure hunt exhilarating feel that arbitrage might.
Yeah. Because I mean, you're sitting at your desk making calls. So it's like with arbitrage, you're constantly, the work to reward ratio, it's right there. You're putting in the work, you're getting the reward. You're putting in the work, you're getting the reward. But with wholesale, it's like people should be prepared for a 90-day window to potentially like not see any real revenue from that work. I mean, yeah, it's possible. Like you could definitely close your first wholesale account in a couple of weeks, right? That can happen. But like to see any sort of like accumulation or traction, I would say takes at least 90 days.
Yeah, 90 days of hard work. I think it becomes easier as you go because you develop the skill sets like we talked about. But like at the beginning, we talk about closing your first wholesale account. I mean, what are the things that people struggle with the most in terms of like, I'm starting from nothing today and I have to source companies, I have to call them. Like, what are the main pitfalls that we see with people that are beginners that are just starting?
Yeah, I think one very common mistake is over analyzing like a brand or a supplier before they've even reached out to the brand, right? Somebody gets stuck in the product research phase. So they find a brand on Amazon and it looks like it might be good, but then they find every reason to not even add that brand to their spreadsheet to contact them. Right. So it's like you shouldn't, beyond like a 15-second glance, you shouldn't really be doing any more in-depth analysis, like other than looking at the tagline of monthly unit sales, um, looking at the selling price, the retail price that it's selling for on Amazon, and seeing, at a quick glance, how does the listing look? Is it well optimized, meaning they have really good imagery and information on the listing, or is it, not well represented?
Yeah, that's definitely a big one because I mean, like it doesn't matter. I mean, we talk about finding the perfect brand, and like even if you find the perfect brand, chances are you're not going to close the account anyway as a beginner. So rather than spending all the time on the hyper analysis of the brand itself, the time is best spent actually doing the action, calling the brand, getting the experience from what we found.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, going off of that, like I mean, you just asked me what are the common pitfalls? Like what else? Over analysis in the beginning phases. What else?
I mean, I think it kind of goes hand in hand. Is like one of the biggest issues that we see is the irony of there are those people out there that will do everything they possibly can except for call a brand and pick up the phone. And it's funny because like you're putting the cart before the horse in a lot of cases like that, because the reality is if you don't just get your feet wet and start getting the experience of doing that, actually throwing yourself into it, nothing else really matters. I mean, you could learn everything conceptually, but if you don't call a brand up, pick up the phone and dial, you're never going to get anywhere in this business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and that applies to anything, right? Like you got to take the action in the task that is the most productive and drives the most revenue, which is those is the revenue building task, right? So in wholesale, that's outreach to suppliers, like contacting the suppliers, contacting at least, you know, 10 to 20 brands per day minimum, right? That's the action that produces the results. And if you're not concentrating in that action, you're not going to yield the results. And we see it all the time. The people that succeed are the ones that just make that a priority. And if nothing else gets done during the week, that happens, right? The revenue driving task happens. The tasks that move the needle happen.
Yeah, you were really big on that at the beginning. I remember you saying that all the time, where it was like, if nothing else gets done, this gets done, because that's everything else is just a byproduct of how much you're reaching out. So, how much you have to source companies, how many price lists you get, how many follow ups you have is all a byproduct of the initial outreach. And so that's huge at the beginning. I think too, like when you're reaching out to a brand, inevitably you're going to call. The first thing that's going to be said is, we don't accept Amazon sellers. And so that's one of the biggest things that we see for someone new who, they get all ready, they get all hyped up, they're going to make their first phone call. And the first thing they say, they get a rejection right in their face. So, how does that approach look for someone who has no experience doing any sort of optimization, doesn't even know what that is? Like, what can they start to kind of inch towards to get that no into a yes?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is like framing the conversation right from the get go. Like, and the last video that we put out on YouTube covers exactly how to frame that conversation from the get go. In the first 60 seconds of that video, I give you my exact opening phone script for a brand, right? And so that is number one. I'll go ahead and link that down below. But at the end of the day, really what we are doing here is we're framing the conversations early on and presenting our business as being like professional and being just, in the way we say things. It's like it's like from the moment we say hello on the phone, it's just like way different than most Amazon sellers because you're coming with an element of professionalism. You're coming with an element of I'm not here to ask for something. I'm simply here to um, potentially work with you. If not, maybe just educate you, maybe help you in an area of your business or get you to think a certain way that maybe you didn't think of before. And that's basically the approach that we take with these brands is because in any cold calling, you're going into it probably, expecting resistance. And so you have to go into that resistance. You have to put yourself in the resistance, right? That's the best way to overcome and get better at things is you have to put yourself inside of the stuff that is, you know, hard to do.
Yeah, I think that there's also kind of a misconception that, like, there's a difference between someone who's a brand new beginner who's never done this before and someone like us who's been doing this for a long time. Like, there's a skill set difference in terms of like how much you've done it. Just like anything else, you get better as you do it more. But as far as the response that we receive, I mean, that video in the first 30 seconds, I mean, those were real phone calls and real rejections. And those were, I mean, granted, you don't get those every time, but that was like the phone is getting hung up on you. And that's the reality. Like, we still deal with that. And just because you've been selling for a certain amount of time doesn't mean that brands are automatically nicer to you. It's just about learning how to overcome that, which you get better at over time. So those become, you know, even though they might be just as frequent, they become less detrimental to your ego and everything because, I mean, we don't care. Like, if anything, we kind of, I don't want to say enjoy it, but there's an element of it where it's like a challenge, you know?
Yeah, and that's because we've seen brands go from, one extreme to another. Like we've seen brands be they'll just be like, I'm never doing an exclusive. Like how many brands have we had tell us like, I'm never doing an exclusive. That's never going to happen. And now we're
Yep.
exclusive. It's like
You just
you
never
know,
know because the initial thought of the initial reasoning behind something often is rooted in a misconception. So, like, the initial belief that we're not doing an exclusive, whatever, we're not going to work with you, whatever it might be, is usually rooted in the fact that they have misinformation from what other Amazon sellers have given them in the past. And so, coming in and flipping that script takes that misconception and changes it, which takes that no and makes it a yes.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times brands, it's that they need to be educated. It's not that they don't necessarily want to work with you. It's just that they need to be educated and understand what's going on. Like a lot of brands, just have no idea how to handle Amazon, and chances are it's been a long history of bad actors.
Yeah, I think that the term when people say it's becoming more saturated always, I mean, we don't take a time to think about whether it's becoming saturated with people that know what they're doing or not. I think the reality is it's becoming saturated with people that don't know what they're doing and they're contributing to the anger and the frustration of these brands, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it allows you to come in more so and flip the script. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as closing your first account, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is you're gonna have to understand that that rejection is not personal and walk towards the steps of overcoming that rejection, and you get better over time, right?
Right. Yeah. And so, anybody just tapping in here now, drop a comment in and let us know, like, are you a beginner? Have you been doing this for a while? Um, and then we can, approach
Yeah,
it
I
as,
mean,
approach it as a beginner, approach
specific
it as,
questions.
yeah, drop them in. Like one thing you said before, which was that, um, like when I first started, yeah, it was like, if nothing gets done, I got to contact suppliers. But like, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing when I first started. You know what I mean? Like we didn't we didn't go into this with like a past sales experience. Like we weren't like high ticket closers, or we weren't like, you know, cold call experts at all. Like I would say I was like I had no idea about how to do any of that, but it's just like again, putting yourself in the resistance is the stuff that yields the results.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, when I had started, like, there was minimal sales experience. It was just from, selling like products on a sales floor type of deal, um, like commodity products. But one of the things that I realized early on with anything sales related is that I enjoyed it. And it didn't feel like work because it gave me more fulfillment than I felt like there was effort, if that makes sense. And so this was like a very natural thing for me, at least to like, not that I was good at it, but I was like, I want to be good at this. I want to get good at it because I find it fun. I think that if you can have that and within this business model, I think that's great, you know?
Yeah, and so Umair enjoyed the last video. Yep. Thanks for watching that one. Hope it was helpful for you in contacting suppliers. You
Yeah,
know,
comedic comments
what it's
too.
all about. Yeah, yeah, that's what it's all about. Is just like that's how we do it. Is just you present, you be professional, legitimacy. Tell them where you're located. Tell them what you do, and then ask the question. Right? Can you tell me more about your e-commerce strategy? Can you tell me more about Amazon? How does that work for you? All right. And then from there, we listen to what they have to say and then develop a question, another question to get them talking more, a response accordingly.
Mm. Yeah, I guess you're gonna have to do more insert some more comedy into the videos. I've heard multiple comments about that saying that like certain things are funny. So I have to make a note. get another career. If brand doesn't want you, doesn't want to talk about Amazon, you could create your own product with higher price and scale. I mean, let's talk about that. I feel like that kind of breaks down the basic definitions of what we're doing with brand direct wholesale versus something like private label. So, like, why might you want to do that, and why might you not want to do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really easy to just say, oh, brand doesn't want to work with me. I'm just gonna, create my own product, um, and sell my own brand. But it's not that easy to do. Like, it takes a long time to build brand equity in the marketplace and have traction, right? In Amazon's algorithm, in any internet algorithm, like, takes time to rank in those algorithms, right? Like, the idea of what we're doing is we are selling name brand products on Amazon that customers already know, like, and trust. And because of that, we are mitigating a ton of risk because we are looking at a chart on Keepa and seeing how much, the units are selling, how many units are selling, what they're selling at, how much money we're going to make. So we can go in it with an educated decision. Whereas you can't do that with private label. Private label is a different model. The long term value is there in terms of building your own brand, but that is its own entirely separate undertaking, right? Very different than what we're doing with wholesale. And so while it might be easy to look at it and say, oh, well, the brand doesn't want to sell to me, I'm just going to go, copy their brand. But, like, we've had seen competitors do that. We see Chinese knockoffs do that every single day. And, time and time again, they maybe gain a little traction, take a little bit of market share, but they fall short because they don't have the brand equity and the traction of the brand behind them, right? When customers really love a brand, they buy the brand, you know? Um, and so, like, it kind of speaks to brand direct wholesale entirely. It's something I was thinking about today, which is like, um, you hear a lot nowadays with businesses talking about how it's getting so much more difficult to market our products. Our strategies aren't working now like they were working in the past, whether it be, through email marketing or paid ads or organic content. Like, a lot of businesses are having to shift strategy and implement different types of marketing strategies into their business. But, like, the luxury that we have with having a diverse portfolio of brands that are very, very consistent is that we don't have to constantly be worrying about pivoting and shifting our marketing strategy, because our marketing strategy is to simply pour fuel on an already burning fire, right? And so if we have one brand down that's down 20% this year from last year, well, we have six other brands that are up, 50%, you know what I mean? And we're constantly funneling more brands in. So it's like, almost like somebody said it on a live once before, it's like almost like a portfolio of stocks kind of thing, It's like, if one brand is down a little bit, we have a bunch of other ones to make up for it.
Yeah, and another thing I just want to add to that. I mean, that was all very correct and insightful. I mean, I think the addition to that is just the amount of time and effort that you would put into starting a competitive brand, and the amount of capital is, like, if you put all that time and effort into closing other brand direct wholesale accounts, you would much more, like, I'm pretty much guaranteeing you that you're going to outperform what you would do with a private label brand, at least at the beginning. It's private label is a little bit more advanced. And so if you're newer to brand direct wholesale, it might be smarter to focus your time there.
Yeah. Um, Umair's asking, is it better to contact brands with more FBA sellers as they might be more inclined to working with you as opposed to a brand with it's only working with a few?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we talk about it as kind of there's a certain point at which the amount of sellers, um, well, I'll put it this way. If there's one seller, we usually are just staying away from it. If there's two sellers, we might be staying away from it. If there's three or four, we're going to contact, we're going to see what's going on, because chances are the brand already has this mentality of limiting the sellers. And if we provide value or do something else, we might be able to work our way in there with less competition from all the other rogue sellers. And then if a brand has 10 sellers, we might be a little more inclined to stay away from it. But if a brand has 30 sellers, 40 sellers, we're actually more inclined to contact that brand because they have such a problem that, again, it could be a value add. So there's kind of like differences and ways that we go back and forth. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all mentality. We have to take a look at the other elements of the listing as well. But I think there's benefits to both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's the transactional relationship versus the let's work exclusively relationship, because we're not going to make money on a product that's selling with 20, 30 sellers on it, chances are, because either we're not going to get the buy box or the price is just tanking and there's no money to be made. Um yeah. So I mean, sellers is not as much of a relevant metric when you're after like brand exclusivity, you know, because we know going into it like what we're going to be after long term.
Yeah,
It
we have
doesn't happen
listings.
right away, but
I mean, we look at listings all the time and we're like, that's an exclusive right away. You know what I mean? As opposed to a transactional account that we want to deal with. We're pursuing that as an exclusive, like you said.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes, you just like you buy product, you don't do it all the time, but like if the conversation was good, the timing's right, you're feeling it, you get that feeling, all right, and the conversation was good, they were somewhat receptive to what you had to say. And then we might even buy like inventory either at a break even or a small loss just to get our foot in the door and start working
Hmm.
with them. Um,
I mean,
that
and
is
going back to the
true.
theme too of no, the theme of closing your first wholesale account. Like when someone is first reaching out to a brand, they might hear us talk about, oh, we're looking for an exclusive and not a transactional, like this and that, right? You shouldn't be focused on any of that at the beginning. You should be focused on getting a profitable product in your inventory. Don't go out there and start swinging for the fences when you don't know what you're doing yet. We definitely didn't do that. Now we look back in hindsight and we're like, oh, we could have had an exclusive with that brand, right? But the reality is when you start, you got to just learn the ropes and get your foot in the door, get a profitable product in your inventory. Base hits add up. Don't go for home runs at the beginning. Just profitable product and start adding account after account, and you'll learn when the time is to ask for exclusivity as you go along.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's like just make the focus, especially in the beginning, um, about just, making money and putting the reps in. Making money means that you got to get your foot in the door. You got to start selling products. Um,
Nate, thanks for joining. What does your prep process look like? In-house prep or sent to prep center, then FBA, or does the brand prep for you?
so we have our own warehouse. So we have some brands, about half of the brands that we work with will ship directly to Amazon FBA warehouse from their warehouse. So we'll send them shipping labels. It'll go from the brand's warehouse to the FBA warehouse. We never see or touch that inventory. And we have some brands that will ship from their warehouse to our warehouse, at which point it will basically just make a 1 to 2 day pit stop at our warehouse because we send it right back out to Amazon. And that's split about 50-50 between the brands that ship direct to Amazon and the brands that ship to us and then ship to Amazon. Um, so that's
Again,
how we do it. We have a warehouse. But
I was going to say
yeah,
again, that's another question that I answered earlier today, which is the percentage of the suppliers that are shipping to Amazon and whatnot, and kind of what that looks like, as well as the biggest objections. And honestly, the biggest objection to that most of the time, and why people don't do it, is because the supplier doesn't understand what that prep process looks like. And so, if you could break that down really simply for them, a lot of times they're going to be willing to do that for you, and it'll help you eliminate the double shipping cost, which is really great.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of
Also, Nate,
suppliers.
I like your profile picture of whatever sort of watch movement that is.
Yeah,
Pretty interesting. Anyway,
yeah. We got a watch guy here.
yep.
Um, so, and for you, for the seller, if you're just starting, right? So the difference between like there's two different routes that we see sellers go a lot. We see them go and work with a prep center, or we see them just continue to ship to their house until they're big enough and they outgrow their house and move into a warehouse. And so, in keeping those two models in mind, those, like, what would you say, maybe some of the advantages and disadvantages are of having a prep center versus having a warehouse?
We like to look at it from the perspective there's two different elements. There's the intangible element, which is the quality control, which we can have control over exactly how the processes are being done within our warehouse, versus there's the other element, which is the monetary element. We have a fixed cost with the warehouse versus a prep center is a variable cost based on how many units you're sending. So there's kind of something where you have to run the numbers on your own to see if like it makes more sense for you to send products to a prep center because that's cheaper than any warehouse that you could get. But regardless of all that, I mean, we were doing a lot of volume out of a house, and you can do that for a very long time. That's a misconception that we see a lot of times in the industry and wholesale is that you need this gigantic facility, that you need all of these SKUs, that you need this massive operation. And the reality is you just don't.
No, I would say you're honestly better off like the other way. You like work out of the house for as long as you can. Um, and then when the time is ready, and you'll know when it's ready because you've outgrown the space, you just physically don't have any more space. Your process is just extremely inefficient. Time to go into the warehouse, or maybe you need to hire some extra people to get in there and they can't come into your house and prep products. So, you get a warehouse like that's, and you don't need a big warehouse, right? You 1,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet, like, I mean, we're quite literally we're running an 8-figure business out of a 2,000 square foot warehouse. I mean, like, people think that this is you don't, people think, I think that is, like you said, a common misconception, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that's been done in this business has been a result of being pushed to do so. In other words, like Brad said, when you can't do it anymore out of the house, upgrade to the warehouse. And I really think that's how you should max out your capacity in whatever you're doing, and then upgrade once you get to that point. Because again, we're going back to putting the cart before the horse. Like we don't want to do that with the business because that just means added expenses, added monthly costs that we don't want.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, we're operating within Amazon's ecosystem, and as we know, like, when operating with Amazon's ecosystem, there's always just, inherent risk, but just like things that'll happen. Like, maybe you move into a warehouse because you think like you're planning to get this, SKU that's going to be moving 5 to 10,000 units a month, and you can't ship it to your house, but you haven't gotten it yet. You're planning to get it, and then so you plan and you get the warehouse, and then the SKU gets shut down by Amazon, right? Like, so now you're locked into a 12-month lease on a warehouse and you don't need it. Like, we see sellers a lot focus on all these things around the business, but never actually focus on like what actually matters. And what actually matters is making the cold calls and doing the outreach. Um, versus like, oh, let me build this website, let me, time to get a warehouse, time, to do all these extraneous things. It reminds me of like when you're young, you play sports. It reminds me of the guy that is like terrible at the sport, but he's got all the fancy and expensive gear and equipment. Like, no, get rid of all
Doesn't
the
make you a good
equipment.
player.
Yeah, be the guy that's good at the sport, not the guy that is good at buying extraneous equipment and adding costs where it's not necessary.
It's an easy trap to fall into though too, because doing things like that, you give the false misconception that you're being successful. You're like, I just upgraded my warehouse. I just did this. I just hired 3 people, whatever it is, right? Like you're giving yourself the false reality that you're becoming more successful in what you're doing. When the reality is that you're not. You're just adding more expenses that you don't need to run the operation at the size that you're running it at. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. Um, so anybody just joining here, I mean, we go live every week, Tuesdays, sometimes Wednesdays. And so a lot of what we focus on is trying to get, beginners to really start and grow their Amazon wholesale business. And so, we're putting out YouTube videos basically every week, that will are really valuable to you guys in scaling. So I highly recommend that you check those out. Um, If there's any last minute questions, pop them in here in the chat. We'll probably be closing out in the next minute or couple minutes.
I think this had some good tips though, as far as, if you're just a beginner. Um, and kind of last thing that I'll say on that is, like, if you are a beginner, we're not going to answer every single question that you might have, at any given time. So start immersing yourself in a community and content and consuming information, because you're going to be able to absorb a lot of info faster, and you're going to be able to get ahead of where other people are at.
Yeah, exactly. So James, thanks for joining again. We've seen you on here before. Nice to have you back. Getting a lot of brands seemingly not interested in selling on Amazon, yet their products are selling on Amazon. That's
Yeah,
frustrating, huh?
that's ignorance. That's
Yeah.
ignorance on their end.
Yeah. So what does that like look like? Because like I mean, we can relate to that all the time. That's a very common response. They say we're not selling on Amazon, but their products are sitting there ready on Amazon.
Yeah, you really got to tie it back to things that they understand. I always talk about translation, translating it into something that the brand can comprehend, and literally look at it like two different languages, because that's what Amazon is. It's a completely foreign language to someone who's mostly used to the brick and mortar, whatever industry that they're in, and understanding that the supply chain is out of control and the products are getting on Amazon. And unless they do something, it's going to continue to negatively affect the rest of their brand off Amazon, is often a good parallel to make, just because that's putting it in perspective of something the brand can understand and therefore will take action on.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people, and you might be reaching out to these brands and you might think, oh, I don't really know that much about Amazon, but a lot of, like, in most cases you probably know more than them. In most cases, not saying that's the case every time. You'll get brands that know what they're doing, right, with Amazon, and usually those brands have very robust e-commerce presence, or they have like a team in house, right, that's doing it. But you will get brands that are sometimes clueless, many times clueless, but other times, knowledgeable about certain areas, but not knowledgeable about other areas, and so a lot of times you have the knowledge, you have way more knowledge than them going into the call, and you might not even
Exactly.
know it.
Exactly. And I think we'll leave this. I'll end this with the quote from my dad, which says that you don't need to know everything. You just need to know more than the person you're talking to. And it's very true for Amazon Wholesale. It definitely applies.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what matters the most. And so we'll leave it at that. Thanks for joining, guys, those who tapped in, and we'll see you next week. Peace
See you
out.
next week.